Hi, this is Elizabeth Debin. I'm coming to you for second Saturdays at the studio, and this is all about abstraction. No, your computer's not broken. The voice and video don't match up. We had some technical difficulties at the studio, so I'll be doing a voiceover for today's second Saturdays. Right here, I'm telling you all about the awesome mug that people won for participating in our event last month, and the winner was Janice. So congratulations to Janice. She got the awesome Metal Arts Guild tumbler. The cool hat you see me wearing, the Metal Arts Guild swag, that's the prize for the winners of this Saturday's event. So the focus this week is all about abstraction. Here's an image by the great artist Pablo Picasso that I think really illustrates the process of abstraction really well, where you're taking an image, in this case the image of the bull, and he's exaggerating parts, making parts larger than life, breaking them into geometric shapes, and then simplifying from there until at the end we're left with a really simple line image that illustrates what a bull is. So there are a few different ways that you can abstract things. You could subtract part of your image away, simplify your image by using simple shapes, smooth out areas, repeat one interesting part. You can combine multiple parts of different images. You can add your own touch with swirls and shapes or repeating motifs in your jewelry design. You can also take different pieces of the image and overlap them to create a new image. So what I'm going to be showing you today is just one technique that I use to abstract things. Abstraction is something that you can apply to your jewelry design to take it to the next level. The focus of these second Saturdays is really at first a design intensive to help you take your designs to the next level and make them more interesting and really push yourself throughout the design process. So I'll be showing you different ways where you can take an image texture that you like and distort it, rescale it, fragment parts to make it more interesting and to influence your jewelry design. So when I'm going through my jewelry practice, I usually start with images first and working in my sketchbook. This is an image that I took of some mushrooms that were growing while I was hiking. I really get inspired by nature and the different textures and up close moments in nature. So I'm going to show you how you can take some of these interesting shapes of these mushrooms and you can trace them, you can simplify them, you can rotate them, and combine them to create a really interesting bracelet. This is one of the first projects that I do with my high school students as they're learning how to pierce metal. They find an image that they like, something about whether it's a shape, a texture, and then they trace different parts of that image and combine it to create a design with positive and negative space. So here's my piece of tracing paper where I traced different shapes from the mushrooms that I really liked. I overlapped them, I twisted them, and all of these tracings are really simplified. And then I colored it in to decide what was going to be the positive space, which ended up being the metal, and what was going to be the negative space or the pierced areas. If you are looking for a place to start with abstraction, this is a really fun project to get started. You don't have to do a big cuff bracelet. You could do something smaller like a pendant or a ring. But this is a great way to kind of start working with abstraction. Here are some examples of some of my students' cuff bracelet images. This student was really inspired by a field of flowers, so they traced different simplified groupings of flowers and clustered them together. There were some places where they had to kind of repeat different parts, and then they created this really beautiful positive and negative space. Another example, it doesn't have to be an actual object or nature thing. I really loved the ripples in the reflection in this photo that I took of some cypress trees. So I combined two of those ripple shapes to create a different design for another pierced cuff bracelet. Here's another student example. They took a leaf shape, and the way they abstracted that one was by creating geometric shapes inside and repeating them and turning them. You can also create a mirrored image to create something more symmetrical. Take one part of your image, trace it, and just fold your piece of tracing paper in half and trace it again, and then you'll have a symmetrical image. You can also think about things on different scales when you're abstracting. Zoom in on just part of an image and use just a small piece. You can also look at things from farther away. Like this is an image that a student did of a cuff bracelet that was inspired by cobblestones. Later on in this second Saturdays, I'm going to kind of walk you through the abstraction process. But if you want to pause and kind of look at my first day assignment for students just starting out on the cuff bracelet project, here's a picture of that. But again, I'll talk about that more and how to actually make that apply to your jewelry making practice later on in the second Saturdays. But now let's talk about other ideas for abstraction in jewelry. I'm going to show you some images that inspire me in my jewelry work. Lately I've been really into lost wax casting and carving waxes. So I'm inspired by different textures in nature. Here's an image of some coral, and I really liked the form that the coral made around those little holes. So that was something that I applied to this ring design. Another repeating theme in my artwork is lichen. I thought that the little spheres that these little cups on the lichen made was really interesting. So I kind of simplified that form and repeated it. This is a drawing I did from when I was at Driftwood Beach in Jekyll, and I took my drawing and I simplified it. I was really interested in the way that the branches twisted and moved together. Here's some more lichen for inspiration for some of my carved jewelry that you'll see. I really focused on the form of kind of those impressions and thought about how could I repeat that or change it to make it abstract and different from what you would just see if you were walking through the forest. Here's another example of another ring I made, lettuce lichen. This one's not mine. I found this one online, but I wanted to show this one to show that you can think of things on a different scale, like a microscopic level. What would neurons look like? Or you could think about what would something look like under a microscope and see if you're inspired by those types of forms and shapes that you see. I also wanted to include some with stone setting to show how other artists took inspiration from things like coral and then were able to incorporate different stones into their jewelry. Just because I don't typically use gemstones in my jewelry doesn't mean you don't have to when you're abstracting. Gemstones and other stones can definitely be part of your jewelry design when you're abstracting. All right, now let's talk about how you actually do this. For this image and design that I'm showing you in my sketchbook, I was inspired by an image of a purple flower that I found, and I really liked the form of that flower. So I started by using tissue paper because I didn't have any tracing paper at hand and tracing the outline of that shape of the flower. Then I thought about how can I twist this or enlarge the parts that I really think are interesting to make it into an interesting design. Then I took that design and I abstracted it again. Even though I liked that second design, I really wanted to push myself. It's always important to push yourself beyond your first design. There are times when I'll design 50 different ideas and I still won't have one that I like. I always tell my students that the design part of jewelry is just as important as the technique part. Here I'm showing you kind of my design process. I have some calendars with some interesting nature images, and I picked the flower image shown because I was really interested in some of the shapes and the swirls that created the form of the flower. So now I'm going to trace just those simple shapes and just those interesting swirls that I liked about this flower. So now that I have my image traced, I turned it because I was really interested in it to the side and I liked that swirl shape. But I wanted to see how I could change this or abstract this in some way. Since I traced it, I had already simplified it through my tracing. But now how can I change it? So I want to go back to those words that I showed at the beginning about different ways that you can abstract. So there was one particular shape that I really liked, and I wanted to enlarge that one and exaggerate it. And then there was another circular shape that I liked that I thought could be an interesting stone that could be layered on top. So this is just kind of a rough design that I was talking through about how I could envision these different shapes as a piece of jewelry. Like maybe the wiggle piece could be like the band of a ring. I could think about doing mixed metals, mixed materials, having parts of this metal domed or other things. But I want to push this design even further because even though that design is okay, how can I take it to the next level and do something that might be even a little more unique? So once I start going from one design to the next, I think about things that I like from the previous design. I'm not back at my original image. I'm just thinking about abstracting the design I just made. So I really like that kind of blobby heart-shaped form and the swirl, but I wanted to challenge myself and think about how else could I incorporate that swirl. Maybe I could create it as a pierced area on this large form that maybe I hollowed. Here's another stone that I was thinking about maybe layering. Then I felt like it was missing something in that negative space. So I went back to my original image and looked at some of the other shapes that maybe I could incorporate. So I like some of the other outlines of the petals and I thought about incorporating those. I wanted to do it in threes because typically things in design look better in odd numbers, whether it's 3, 5, 9, up to, you know, infinity. So here I'm flipping back in my sketchbook just to show you like some designs I was working through as I was designing a ring. I went through more than 50 different designs and abstracting the previous design or taking parts from one part and applying it. Um, so I just want to show you that the design is a big part of jewelry making. So really take time and challenge yourself. Another way that you could design things if drawing isn't necessarily your strength, you could take some shapes that you trace and actually cut them out and rearrange them and take photos of those arrangements and change them a little. Take photos of those arrangements. Maybe you could photocopy parts and enlarge parts if you want to experiment with scale. But you don't have to be good at drawing to be good at abstraction in jewelry design. So that's pretty much it for Second Saturdays at the Studio for the month of August. I hope that you are able to take this idea of abstraction and apply it to your own way of jewelry making. Whether you're a beginning jewelry artist and you want to try that pierced cuff bracelet or pendant design that I showed at the beginning, or whether you're into carving wax like I am or setting stones. So your, I guess, challenge this month is to take this idea of abstraction and apply it to your own jewelry design. So what you'll submit this month is you can submit a picture of your designs and your abstraction process along with your actual jewelry object that was inspired by your abstraction. You can email photos to get this cool hat that they're zooming in on. info@metalartsguildga.org. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in September.